Hello, I'm Ian Beavis and welcome to episode 5 of This Is Important. This is our show that's really designed to help you understand what's going on in the auto industry by covering stories that don't get the coverage everywhere else. At the end of the day, we want you to be smarter and have context for what's happening. LEK and VM have just released their 4th annual global mobility study. It covers many countries across the globe and it's showing that mobility services are expanding and growing globally. But what is starting to show up is that the US, with an early lead, is now starting to become a bit of a laggard and things are starting to slow. Why this is important? What is happening here is that there's a growing awareness of mobility services, but the awareness is not necessarily turning into behaviour or usage. Now, this is not necessarily the case globally. You've got situations in China and India, in Australia and in Canada, frankly, where they are seeing growth in both awareness and usage. But in the US, which had an early lead, it's now starting to slow up. There's several reasons for this, but the most obvious reason is, unlike the countries where these things are advancing very, very quickly, where there's very much coordinated government and private partnerships in terms of investment and subsidies, etc., to grow these things and build awareness, the US has got a patchwork quilt. We've got basically 13 states that are interested in electrification and mobility services, then a little bit going on at the federal level, but there's not a lack of coordination. Add to that the fact that we're a big country with 50 states. It's very difficult to communicate things, and so the awareness activities that really need to happen to get things moving just aren't being coordinated and frankly are not happening at the levels that they need to. This does not bode well for the US going forward. What we're going to see here is the US being an island, frankly, in the mobility world, with the rest of the world increasing in mobility services. This is not good for one very big reason. Money follows money. So if you're not getting the usage in the United States, investment won't follow. If you don't get the investment, you start to lag. Not a good picture all around. We need to be very worried about this. Electrification is really starting to get some traction in the trucking industry. Trucking is going to be moving into production side of electrification at a faster and greater rate than the rest of the industry. But there's an existential threat from electrification that isn't getting enough talk, and it affects both OEMs and dealers. Why this is important is the trucking industry is much more vertically integrated than the general passenger car industry. So what you've got is a system of going right from the OEM through the dealer network where there are not a lot of outside parts. The parts are all OEM-based parts. So you've got an industry where they only make 6% margin on the trucks, but they make about 35% margin on the parts. Great stuff. And trucks use a lot of parts. They do a tremendous amount of miles. And so you're replacing a lot of equipment. What happens in a world where you have electric motors that don't have many moving parts and don't require replacement? This is a big deal, and it's going to have a real impact on the business. The worry here is that no one seems to have tackled it and no one seems to have a solution to it. And so as electrification comes on, the margins in the business are going to start to collapse. There's going to be a huge shakeout. We don't know who the leaders are going to be and we don't know where they're going to come from. But there's going to be someone that's going to survive and they're going to work this out. It's worth watching. Mobility and electrification are inextricably linked with each other, and there's going to be a real shakeout on both electrification and mobility, as we've talked about before. As I said earlier, on electrification we don't know who's going to be the leader. On mobility services and how it actually pans out with micro-mobility, we don't know how that's going to end up either. What I can tell you though is we'll be covering more stories on this subject as time goes on, because it's going to be the story of the decade.